While we were all screaming at each other about statues and masks, politics and identity, something much, much bigger was happening in the background that no one talks about. I'm not some crazy conspiracy theorist. I don't think that everything is run by a secret group behind the scenes. But I feel like everyone can see that something broke in 2020, and in many ways it was all by design. That's what I want to talk about in this video. Because that year was more than just a pandemic. It was a reset, a complete paradigm shift in the way we interact with the world. I've talked to many people and they felt the same way. It's not just you imagining it. It seems like there was life before 2020 and life after 2020, almost like an alternate reality that we all got transported into. But all of it, I think, can be explained in tangible terms, and that's why I think this might be my most important video ever on this channel. Because obviously a lot of people nowadays think that there is something off with the world, but until we truly understand how exactly 2020 reset the system, we'll never truly understand why everything still feels off to this day. So I'd appreciate if you stick with me towards the end, because I'll also share my personal story of 2020, how that year didn't just reshape the world, it actually reshaped myself as well. 2020, like any year, started off normal enough. People making New Year's resolutions, going back to work, thinking about their summer vacations. It all just felt like business as usual, and no one really thought that their life could be turned upside down within a matter of weeks. But then the news hit. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. At first it was just something going around in China, halfway across the world. But then I remember, I think Italy went into lockdown, a few other countries fell, and then boom, it was here in America. And within weeks, the entire world just stopped. Entire cities went silent. The roads were completely empty at rush hour. Schools closed, jobs went on pause. People were even banned from seeing their own friends and family. And the deeper meaning behind all of that is that this very basic belief we carried, that life just always keeps moving forward and nothing ever happens, or whatever that meme is, that was all shattered overnight. Something actually did happen. And that was the first real reset of many that I'm going to get into. But it showed us this harsh reality that normal life isn't guaranteed. Normal society and everything it depends on, the system, the routine, the overall sense of stability, it's all a thin veil that could collapse at any moment. And when that veil collapses, everything we took for granted can disappear in an instant. This wasn't just a matter of a virus, it was a complete paradigm shift. It proved that society is not as stable and as structured and as organized as we once thought it might be. The world can be turned off like a light switch, just like that. And once you've seen that, you can't really unsee it. You don't just go back to believing that everything is always fine and things always go on as usual. And what's interesting is that older generations who actually lived through civil wars, world wars, cold wars, they actually were aware of this fact because they went through these huge historical events. But COVID was the first time for us, especially in Gen Z, to experience something like that firsthand and rip the veil of ordinary life off for us to see. It was something that we had never experienced before, and that started a major sea change. But the deepest wound from 2020 maybe wasn't just the virus itself. It was that people started to lose all trust in the institutions that we used to trust. That was the year that people en masse really realized that the government lies straight to our faces. The media lies, and even scientists lie. The people that we were taught to hold above politics, they bent the truth right in front of our faces during a time of crisis. For example, I remember when these public health officials were telling us that masks don't work at all, there's no need to stock up on them. And then out of nowhere, suddenly masks were required everywhere, and you couldn't even go into a store without one. At first, they also said that lockdown will be 2 weeks. Then those weeks turned into months, and those months turned into years in some places. Scientists, the government, the media, they all contradicted each other constantly and publicly. And a lot of news outlets just, spun facts to fit their own narratives on both sides. And the worst part in all of it is that when ordinary people dared to ask questions, even if they might have been wrong, they weren't given real answers. They were shamed, mocked, or censored for having any opinion that went against the mainstream, even though, like I said, the mainstream itself was completely contradictory over the course of this whole thing. Don't question the science, bro, is what they told us. But anyone who says that isn't really thinking critically, because the whole point of real science is to be questioned. That's literally the foundation of it. To do your own research and come to your own conclusions, not to just think something because a government official told me to. And those same government officials, during this whole ordeal, were shown to have lied constantly. And here's the problem. Once you catch someone lying, especially during a crisis, even if, let's say, they did it with the best of intentions, you still don't forget it. Some people don't forgive it either. And 2020 broke the illusion that institutions cared about truth. Again, the government, the scientists, the media. What it proved is that these institutions in charge of ordinary people, all they really care about is control. And that might sound obvious, but 2020 really opened our eyes up to that fact. And now we live in the aftermath. People don't trust the media anymore. People don't trust the government even less. They don't even trust the experts that we once thought were real professionals. And then at the very same time of all of this, as if it weren't enough, the culture war absolutely exploded during this time. While most of us were locked inside, some people were outside setting the country on fire, figuratively and literally. The Floyd protests and BLM obviously swept across the country. What were intended to be peaceful marches turned into riots. Entire cities were filled with smoke and anger. And the reaction to it was also controversial, because when the police were sent in to squash the protests, that caused a lot of violence as well. And then, as if that wasn't enough, obviously the 2020 election rolled around. Probably the most polarizing election in modern history up to that point, because suddenly every issue became tribal. Mask versus no mask, vaccine versus anti-vax, Trump the so-called fascist versus Biden the so-called communist. Because in the midst of all the chaos, the political divide became more polarized than ever, especially with more and more people indoors, online, and retreating into their echo chambers. And during this time, people weren't just disagreeing, it was more ruthless than ever. I'd heard stories about people cutting each other out of their lives because of political disagreements. In some cases, family members stopped talking to each other, friendships got strained, relationships broke apart. And another reason behind this, by the way, is that the media poured gasoline onto the fire. Every headline was designed to make you the most mad or trigger the strongest reaction to get clicks and views. Both sides had a specific political agenda or a narrative that they were pushing to rile up their base and piss off the other side. We thought we were watching the news, but in a lot of cases, it was really a prepackaged culture war being broadcast straight into our living rooms. Long story short, what I'm trying to say is that these small cracks that were already there in America ripped wide open in 2020 during a time of huge uncertainty and chaos. That's what happens during these worldwide crises. Everything becomes inflamed. But this time around, we never went back to the way things were before. To this day, the culture war is still the default setting for everything. Every topic, no matter how small, still becomes a battlefield. That's why you see people getting angry over a Sydney Sweeney ad or a Cracker Barrel logo or some shit nowadays. But I hope you got to this point in the video, because it's probably the most important. Because while we were all screaming at each other about statues and masks, politics and identity, something much bigger was happening in the background that no one talks about. 2020 just so happened to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, upward wealth transfers in all of history. While you were stuck at home watching the news and arguing with relatives on Facebook, billionaires were raking in cash. They were living the good life. Amazon absolutely exploded in profits, and Jeff Bezos at the time was the richest man in the world, on track to maybe even become a trillionaire. Walmart, Target, and other big retailers also thrived because they were the only ones deemed essential, while small businesses were forced to close. Tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, Google, they obviously hit record highs because everyone was using them while being stuck indoors. Netflix and Hulu subscriptions and other streaming platforms, they skyrocketed, and other Silicon Valley companies like Zoom went from niche software to a household name. And meanwhile, like I said, small businesses, they got completely obliterated. They didn't stand a chance. Local restaurants went out of business, local gyms closed forever, and while some average people got a check of $1,200 or whatever, the richest people in the country increased their wealth by trillions. And that's not even to mention the hedge funds and private equity firms, because while we were locked in our houses, they were busy buying them. They went on a shopping spree. So it's no wonder why, a few years later, it's harder to buy a house. Because corporations own them all now, and they either A, turn them into rental properties so that they can take money out of your pocket every month while you own nothing, or they'll sell it to you but at an exorbitant price. And all of this wasn't just about money, it was about power and control. 2020 was when corporations and mega wealthy individuals truly established themselves as the rulers of society, and we're just the serfs. So when people look back at 2020 and say it was about masks, protests, and politics, they're not wrong, but they're missing the bigger picture behind all of this. Again, the huge upward wealth transfer that nobody talks about. The real story was that power was consolidated at the top. That's what really restructures society. That's why everything feels different. And we're still living in that aftermath today. Every time you walk past that empty storefront with the closed sign in the window, and the next second you see a giant Amazon truck drive by. Obviously everyone got crushed by COVID, but I would say that if any certain group got crushed the hardest by this, it was Gen Z. Because 2020 ripped away an entire year of our lives, but for us it wasn't just any year. It was some of the most formative ones that we'll ever have. High school seniors lost their prom, their graduation, the once-in-a-lifetime experience of walking across the stage. College students lost their campus life, the dorms, the friendships, even the parties. Young workers lost their internships, networking, early jobs, and experience that could have set them up for the future. And all of these things aren't just for fun, they're real milestones. They're things that every generation before us got to experience, but we missed out to one degree or another. And the worst part is what replaced it. Screens and more screens, endless screens. TikTok exploded during that year when everyone was stuck inside and had nothing better to do. Then from TikTok, it spawned these other short-form content platforms like Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And the result of that was brain rot. If you ever wondered where brain rot came from, I think the origin was 2020. TikTok during the pandemic was the patient zero for brain rot. People's attention spans got absolutely cooked. And of course, other technologies like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all these streaming services became even more popular overnight. Video game companies had a great year. Even the wackest shit like crypto and those NFT monkeys, if you remember. 2020 was the peak for that. Essentially, during that time, society at large filled the void of real life with digital life. And our brains still haven't recovered. Our attention spans are completely cooked. Doom scrolling has become second nature to many people. Real-world socializing has gotten replaced by parasocial relationships and even AI. And during this time, Silicon Valley had no complaints. They made bank. All while we got lonelier, more anxious, more depressed, more addicted. But hey, they cashed out. And even looking forward, I think the next generation after us might even be worse off. Because while Gen Z lost real-world experiences, Gen Alpha, the kids who are even younger, never even got the chance to have them in the first place. Nowadays they're growing up in a world where digital is the default. iPad babies are a thing now. Face-to-face interaction is now optional. In this whole shift, this rewiring of how our brains function, how we connect with one another, it started back in 2020. Now if you've watched to this point, I really do appreciate your attention. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And for that, I'll tell a little bit of my personal story. Because 2020 not only reshaped the world, but it reshaped my own reality as well. 2020 was supposed to be my high school graduation year. In that very same spring, a few months before graduation, that's when everything shut down. 2-week lockdown that everyone was excited about soon turned into just the whole rest of the school year being cancelled. No prom, no graduation ceremony, no feeling of closure and celebration. Just silence and sitting in my room, shutting off my Zoom camera and playing video games during virtual classes. And even though I personally kind of hated my high school, it was still a weird and negative feeling knowing that all of those lasts, like the last day of class, the last time seeing my friends, the last chance at making any last-minute memories, all of those things had already happened without me even knowing at the time. There are many people I'll never see again, and at the time I didn't know it was my last time seeing them. And then to purely add insult onto injury, right around that time was when college decisions happened. And I was a very hard worker, overachiever, and I had to sit through getting rejected by every single Ivy League school that I applied to, even though I literally did everything right. perfect grades, literally one question off from a perfect SAT score, AP and IB classes all across the board, math competitions and other achievements, extracurriculars and all that stuff too. I thought my future was set. I thought that my 18 years of hard work will pay off in this moment, and then suddenly it was gone, just like that. And looking back on it now, it's almost like a weird parallel kind of effect, where it felt like at the same time people were losing their jobs, their livelihoods, and maybe even their lives, I was also losing my lifelong dream. And it didn't make sense. It felt random, cruel. Who could have ever seen this coming? But at the same time, my personal situation and the whole pandemic both converged on teaching me the same lesson, that the world is completely chaotic and unpredictable, that stability is an illusion, and that you can do everything right and still lose it all due to factors outside of your control. Whether it's me getting rejected by almost all the colleges I applied to, or a family building a business over 20, 30 years just to see it all crumble. You can spend all this time building something and possibly lose it within a week due to external circumstances. Nothing is really guaranteed. And honestly, that kind of shook me to my core because I had a specific worldview of how things should be. But once I got over it, this realization kind of freed me. Because when you understand that nothing is guaranteed, you stop clinging so tightly to the illusion of safety, and maybe even become more courageous to live life on your own terms. But it also taught me something else pretty valuable, that you can come back after a tragedy or a disaster, and you can come back stronger than before. Because at the time, I thought I was ruined. No high school graduation, no Ivy League school, no plan for my life. But because of that whole reset, I had to try even harder to figure out my own path. And obviously that took a bit of time. But once that time came, I stopped chasing the illusion of prestige and started chasing real purpose in my life. And that eventually led me here, talking to you right now, making videos and, trying to build a life on my own terms. So long story short, my life eventually did get better, much better after 2020. Not in the way that I planned, but rather in a way that I never expected. So I can say that 2020 broke me, but it also remade me into something better. And that's the message I hope you guys can take away from this. But back to the bigger picture, I really do think that the world restarted in 2020. It was a perfect storm of things that changed the world in a way such that we can never go back to the way things were before. The old systems broke, trust broke, normalcy broke, we became broke. And that sucks, but maybe in the long run it's okay. And I think the mindset is to stop waiting for things to go back to normal and just accept that the world has changed. And maybe in many ways there really isn't a very positive outlook on society. But even so, that doesn't mean that you can't at least make the most of your own life. And that starts by understanding and accepting the way things are, and obviously trying to move forward accordingly. It's in our nature as human beings to long for the past, especially a past that was better, a past where, a McDonald's sandwich didn't cost $13 and houses were affordable and dating and marriage was actually possible. But at the same time, I think it's time for us to realize that those things have come and gone to some extent or the other, and try our best to not give up and still build something meaningful in the present. So even though society itself might be broken, you can still learn the lessons of 2020. That life is fragile, that the world is chaotic, that you can come back from failure. Then maybe you can start to shift things in your favor. That's the mindset I have at least. Because for me, I thought 2020 was the year that everything ended, but looking back, it was kind of the year that everything began. Oh, that was a long one. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you've gotten to this part, mad respect. You actually have an attention span. And leave a comment too, as I always try to respond. If my videos have ever meant something to you and you'd like to support the channel, you can join me over on Patreon, where you can message me one-on-one, join our community chat, and see some behind-the-scenes content. Or you can become a channel member and you'll have access to the entire archive of videos. A lot of previous ones that were more personal and in-depth, I made them members only, but you'll be able to see all of them, along with the many hours of full-length live stream replays. Again, I really do appreciate everyone who supports the channel, because I really try my best to make this as genuine and authentic as possible for you guys. Like, every part of this video is completely my own. I don't have like a sponsorship in the middle of the video. I don't try to sell you online courses or affiliate marketing or some crypto scams or whatever these influencers try to sell nowadays. So thank you to everyone who understands and appreciates that. Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well. As you guys can see, I'm up in the mountains on a backpacking trip. One other quick message I wanted to get across is that